Alfa Romeo. I don't know exactly how they say that, but
tomato.
Yeah, we'll call it Romeo just because it sounds sexy.
Welcome to Going In Tight.
Freaking tight.
Coming out loose.
Yeah, buddy. We did it, boys.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Going In Tight, Coming Out Loose. This is Chris Gibson. And as always, with me is my co-host, Bart Lewis.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah, we've got an exciting docket for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the races that happened at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We are going to be talking the differences between F1 and NASCAR, getting a little bit into that. It's something that has irked Bart for a while now, so we're going to let him get it off of his chest, the differences between F1 and NASCAR and what we can do in NASCAR to adopt some of the things successful and avoid some of the pitfalls that they've come across. And then we'll look at Kentucky coming up this next weekend and finish things out with you guys. So, Bart, let's get started with the recap of Indianapolis. What do you think of the race this weekend?
I thought all the races were really good. First of all, NBC took over. A lot of people don't talk about the change in broadcasters, but my opinion is I like NBC a little bit better. I like that they have so many personalities and so many opinions covering the race. I do like Mike Joy and history and knowledge that he brings when he's commentating. But just two guys in the booth. Jeff Gordon, he's still trying to work out the kinks, in my opinion. So I really liked hearing the guys over at NBC and gals over at NBC Sports take over. They delivered a great race for us. So, yeah, it was pretty good. The finish of that Xfinity road course was nuts. I mean, the videos of the cars getting off the ground in the corners, they really took that road course and made it something special. So that was exciting to see. Did you like that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the road course. It's something that we don't see a whole lot from the Xfinity guys. So I thought the race turned out to bring some of the most exciting racing that we've seen this season. We've had some really good cup races, some really great finishes in cup races, but the whole road course was just watching those top 7 to 10 guys in the Xfinity series battle it out. And, you know, specifically when Allgaier, Briscoe, and Haley and Chastain, they're all battling it out. And it's just super impressive what they were able to bring to it. It was like video game racing. They were using the person in front of them as their brakes and using the guy beside him as the wall, and they were going all out. It was insane racing, absolutely fun finish, and awesome to watch Chase Briscoe get. I know he's a Ford guy, not my person, but congrats to him. He's been through the ringer this year.
He certainly has, and he's not messing around. I mean, when he said that he's going to win, I think he said 8 races this year to be competitive to further his career.
Yeah,
boy, I mean that's a steep goal in Xfinity, and he's 5 races into that now.
Yeah, that was his 5th race, and he had some terrible stuff happen. Him and his wife had a miscarriage earlier in the year. She told him to go back out and race. He won the race after that happened to his family. And yeah, and that was awesome. We talked about that on one of the earlier episodes, just the emotional victory that he had there. I don't know, man. It was just seemed like they laid a framework for something that we could do. We talked about it last week. What can we do? And we didn't want to get swept into turning every track into utilizing the road course. But it seems like one of those things where I'd rather see them add a race at Indianapolis and use the road course, just give us something different, because what Xfinity did with it was amazing. That was a fun race to watch.
Well, we got to see 3 different races
Yes.
in 3 different days. I believe, well, maybe it was 2 different days. I can't remember.
2 days, yeah. It's
And then we
July
had
4th weekend. We're trying to remember everything we can.
All right, we killed some brain cells. So we had ARCA at Lucas Oil Speedway, which is a short track, and then the road course, and then Indy. So, I mean, all in all, I know there's a lot of people that didn't like the move from Daytona on 4th of July weekend, and certainly I like that track on 4th of July weekend. I've been to 2 of the last that they had scheduled there, so it just means a lot to me. But seeing that they made an equally awesome move in another direction, I'm good with it. I thought it was great. And then the Cup race, I thought all in all was pretty good. It's definitely looking like it's going to be the Denny Kevin show this year. But unfortunately, tires were a big issue, which isn't something that you typically see anymore. But Goodyear definitely, whatever tire they brought to the track, had some issues with it, because I saw some hard hits. I mean, Eric Jones, Denny Hamlin, who else hit the wall really hard?
Bowman hit the wall.
Bowman, yeah. I mean,
they all came out of the car with their pupils the size of the end of a pinpoint. And, I think it was, just a tire. I mean, they looked dazed when they got out of the car. Those were hard hits. And all out of that same turn, too.
Yeah, so and they knew that their tires were wearing. So it was a risk that they're willing to take. And when they go, they go. But, man, when the spotter tells you to catch your breath, you know that everyone saw that, and it was a hard hit when your car hits that wall going 180 and catches fire. I mean, whew.
Yeah, well, one of the announcers, I forgot who it was. It might have been Junior, who said that the track at Indy is like a cheese grater. The way that it's laid, it's just got big thick seams if you get down close to it. So yeah, it was always that right front tire for everybody. You saw Byron's crew chief just get absolutely frustrated when he blew that tire himself. So it was crazy to watch.
Well, I mean, everybody has their years. I definitely expected Penske to do a lot better than they did. I don't know why. I just thought Roger Penske buying the track would give some sort of advantage to the team, but they didn't really see them take off towards the front like I thought they would. I think Logano was like nearly back in 20th majority of the race. But we saw a lot of names that typically are in the back as rookies do a lot better. So Cole Custer got a top 5. So Stuart Haas is really doing well. I know I was talking smack about Eric Almirola here recently, and he's on fire right now. So props to that whole team for doing pretty well.
Can you start talking crap about Jimmy Johnson? Because every time you talk crap about somebody, they start getting top 5s and top 10s. So maybe that'll cure the COVID, bring him back, and he can get a top 5.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll have to start thinking about some smack talk I can have for Jimmy. But then we also saw some top 10s from Michael McDowell. He's showing some consistency and his team that we haven't seen before. Reddick is still, I don't know.
Along as a rookie.
He is picking it up fast. And then Bubba Wallace, he was in the top 10 as well. And quite possibly what I was most impressed with, despite I think, I don't know, like 15 cars, nearly 15 cars, maybe I don't even know the exact number. It might be less than that. But a lot of cars didn't finish the race just because of the chaos in pit road, which we can touch on here in a second. But a lot of cars ended up in the wall. So, but what I was most impressed with, Ross Chastain in that 77 for Spire Motorsports, also somebody we spent a whole episode talking trash about. Yeah. He got 17th. So,
we weren't talking trash about Ross Chastain, though. We were talking trash about Spire Motorsports and all those low-level teams. We like Ross.
Well, I take it back. If Spire Motorsports can get in the top 20, I don't consider them the lower-tier team. So while we looked at the stats for the first half of the year, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they can prove us wrong.
I'm going to need more from them.
Certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I think it helps when you get the issues that we had on pit road. On lap 12, like a 9-car pileup, and it doesn't look that bad on television, but then you look at how narrow that is as they're entering, and you look at how fast they're going. It's 55 miles an hour. That's how fast that we drive just going to work. So smacking into the back of somebody or having somebody run into the back of you or into the side of you, or if you're Blaney's tire changer who got smacked good.
Yeah. And his other tire changer jumped up on the roof of the car. I mean, that was some
Yeah, there's some
reaction.
agile guys. It shows the athletes that they are. We touched on that last week too. They're athletes, and I've just got to give it to that tire changer. He scooted out of the way and then got up on the stretcher and was just good to go. But
yeah,
that was unfortunate for Justin Allgaier, who was filling in for Jimmy Johnson. I know that Jimmy Johnson had to be devastated after 630 plus career starts. The guy that's filling in for him in his farewell season, because he gets plagued by this COVID-19 disease, and then he wrecks out because he couldn't slow down quick enough on pit road to miss that wreck.
Yeah, I was listening to on the radio. I listened to the first 20 laps on the radio, and I think it was the competition caution. It was lap 12.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
all of a sudden, they're about to break into what everyone's doing, different adjustments, and all of a sudden you just hear chaos on pit road. There's carnage everywhere. Like, what?
Yeah, it was wild to watch.
That. Yeah, so crazy stuff.
Yeah, like you said, I think it was awesome to see some lower tier people showing out. I am full on bring Reddick to Hendrick Motorsports. If there's any way that Jimmy does leave, Jimmy said he's uncertain about the future with how everything's gone. But if he does leave and Rick Hendrick is able to buy out that contract, I would gladly see Tyler Reddick in the 48.
Well, cool. So good race this weekend. That was fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
True or false? All right, everybody. Next segment, we're going to ask Gibson 10 true or false questions about NASCAR history, random and sometimes educational, just to see what he knows. All in the attempt to give more knowledge to fans out there as they learn the sport, as we're getting a lot of new eyeballs here. So here we go. You ready?
Yeah, I have no clue what's coming here, so don't embarrass me too bad.
Well, I didn't know the answer to a lot of these, so
okay. That makes me feel better.
It'd be fine if you don't. Here we go. First question. Chase Elliott's real first name is Clyde.
False.
That's true. His real first name is Clyde. And you'll hear Dale Jr., he calls him Clyde. So
okay.
It's true.
Well, I can believe that.
Yeah.
Dawsonville's a strange place.
It certainly is. They have a pool hall that doesn't serve alcohol. So let's just think about that for a second. All right, second question. Brett Favre was once a part owner in the NASCAR team.
True.
That's true.
Yeah.
Dale Jarrett only lasted 1 year, but he was a part owner. Third question. Bobby Allison started the first Polish victory lap where they go backwards after they win the race, which they all do for the most part now.
False.
That's true. I'm sorry, that is false.
Yeah, I was about to say.
What I meant to say is correct.
Correct. My statement was a truth.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Do you know who it was?
Who was the first guy to go backwards? It wasn't Senior, was it?
It was not.
Who was it?
Alan Kwiatkowski.
Oh, so way older than Senior.
Yeah. He did it for three. I believe he won 3 crown jewels, and he did it for all 3.
Okay.
Never got the 4th, but while he was only doing it for big races as something special, it was just taken over, and now everyone does it. But it's
That's
cool
a good
though
one.
because it's on the. It's just cool to see a car go in a different direction.
Yeah.
All right, next question for you. NASCAR would allow driver Dick Trickle to smoke cigarettes in his car during cautions.
Yes.
That is true. Dick Trickle, the greatest name of all time in the history of NASCAR.
Chain smoking
during cautions.
The real question is, and I would like to figure this out at some other point, was he smoking some Winstons in there? Because at the time it was the Winston Cup.
Well, I'm sure that was the only thing allowed. I'm sure you could just go to a bucket throughout the NASCAR track and just pick up a free pack of Winstons.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, next question.
I'm doing all right here.
Yeah,
I've only missed one
good.
so far.
Yeah. So number 5, Michigan International Raceway used to use helicopters to dry the track's surface.
False.
It's true.
Yeah, that's
apparently it was before the Air Titans They were using helicopters. One of them ended up crashing, and so that ended.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, one of them crashed. So it ended the stint of track drawing using a helicopter.
It's got to be better than the guys using the hand blowers like they did at Pocono.
Yeah. Imagine if they did that now. How crazy would that be if you just saw like 16 helicopters hovering over the track while it's raining? All right, number 6, Richard Petty is credited for inventing the window net that we see in NASCARs today.
False.
True. Again, that's true. I did not know that. And I found that a little hard to believe.
He didn't strike me as a guy that's like worried about safety.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been in the sport as long as the sport's been a sport, basically. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure he recommended a lot of changes in NASCAR over the years. Number 7, Darrell Waltrip holds the record for most starts without a win.
True.
It's false. His brother Michael Waltrip, he started 463 races without a win, and that is the record to this day. He ended up winning the 2001 Daytona 500. That what broke the streak. All right, number 8, the oldest driver to compete in a NASCAR sanctioned event was 87 years old.
That seems old. That seems dangerous. That's a death wish. Yes, true.
It is false. The oldest driver.
You're really killing me here at the end.
I know, this one was kind of a trick question. Herschel McGriff was 90 years old when he raced a NASCAR sanctioned event. 90.
I'm sorry, I don't know who that is.
I don't either, but he was 90. That's
Good
off to Herschel.
Lord. Yeah. I wonder if he drove like he was 90.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what event it was, but.
Good Lord. Talk about lap traffic.
All right, number 9. Rusty Wallace holds the record for the highest speed ever reached in a NASCAR event.
No, that's false.
That is correct. Yeah, it is false. Bill Elliott holds the record. It was 212 miles an hour at Talladega in 1987. I was trying to trick you up there because Rusty does hold a record for the fastest lap during, I think it was testing. It was 228 also at Talladega. 228.
Okay. Yeah, that's hauling ass.
All right, final question. Here you go. Number 10.
All right, give it to me.
Drivers will go number 1 while driving race cars.
100% true.
It's true. Yeah, people who drive race cars, race car drivers, NASCAR drivers, and other drivers for that matter, hopefully not regular people drivers, but they don't have the luxury of stopping to go to the bathroom. I hope they're not going number 2, but
I'm sure somebody has.
I'm sure. But
I can tell you if I took one of those hits on the wall at Indianapolis like Denny or Bowman did this weekend, I'm going 1, 2, and whatever throwing up is. I'm doing all of them at once.
It's gross, but it's so hot in the car, it certainly dries up probably pretty fast. But you don't really hear drivers talk about it. I do recall maybe in the last couple of years hearing a Radioactive where Austin Dillon was talking about how much pee he just peed to his spotter. So a random bit of knowledge there. So that was true, false. Good job, Chris. True or false? All right, everybody, it's come to that time where I can fully get it off my chest. That's right. We're talking about F1 versus NASCAR. How are they similar? How are they different? Why is one wildly more popular than the other? And what do we think that we can poke at and give some advice to NASCAR to make our sport even better than it is today? So, Chris, kick us off here. Tell us a little bit about F1. What is the history of it? How has it come from starting to where it is today?
Let me start out by saying we are by no means Formula One gurus or even novices. This is just something that as the sport continues to grow in America, we've taken notice of, and it's obviously something that Bart has wanted to compare and get off of his chest now for a while. So like we said last week with NASCAR starting on the beaches of Daytona, the Formula One series, it was actually taken from a racing style in the 1920s and 30s, but they didn't have their first championship until 1950. And the cars that they were racing were these pre-World War II supercharged engines. And as they came in and they came up with this international formula, hence the Formula One, they were coming up with different rules and regulations for the size of the car, and there was this crossover between these supercharged and naturally aspirated engines. And a naturally aspirated engine was one like we have. It doesn't have a supercharger or something forcing air into the engine. But they had their first championship in 1950. It was won by an Italian guy, Giuseppe Farina, and I probably pronounced that wrong, but he was driving his Alfa Romeo. We'll call it Romeo just because it sounds sexy. And he won that first driver championship. And over the years, the car has taken a ton of different forms. So back then, they were racing the car and the engine was in the front. Nothing like the car that you see now where the engine is located behind the driver. So they have gone through many different versions of their car. NASCAR has done this as well. Formula One seemed to do it quite a bit more often. It seemed like every 3, 5, or 7 years that they were redoing either the chassis or the engines, but a lot of things have remained the same. So when they first started out racing, they had manufacturers like Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, Mercedes-Benz, and Maserati. Now the main manufacturers of the engines are Ferrari, Mercedes-Benz, Honda, and there's another one. It might still be Alfa Romeo. I don't know for sure, but they have gone through so many different formulations of these cars. They've gone from 12-cylinder engines to 8-cylinder engines to what they race now is a V6 engine, and it takes into place all this different hybrid technology, which you'll hear us touch on some of that later on. But
so the question that I have is that we know how NASCAR started. It was moonshiners running illegal products, souping up stock cars that you can buy anywhere. Your neighbor could have. Anybody could have it. Your Oldsmobile, your Buick, or whatever. How did they come to that design, that open-wheel design to drive that car or build the car the way it looked?
Actually, I don't really know the answer to that question. There's not a clear-cut thing that I was able to find that said they were doing this because they were trying to outrun the police and running moonshine. It's obviously a very different scenario where it seems like they were just racing these engines that they had supercharged, and that's how the sport developed there. So I don't have a really solid answer there for you, unfortunately.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's so interesting just to know where the start of the sport came from and how it got started. So let's just talk about some similarities. So how do they line up? How does NASCAR compare to what F1 is today? So both started around the same time. The seasons are essentially the same. F1's March through December. NASCAR running February through November. So about the same timing. The major difference here is that F1 is only running 21 races yearly, and NASCAR is running 36. So it's a giant difference there. So NASCAR is running a crazy amount of races on top of all the feeder series, because F1 does have feeder series, F2, F3. I'm not sure what they're officially called. The one interesting piece that I found different or very different, and I did not know this, is that the length of an F1 race cannot be more than 90 minutes for safety reasons. There's definitely, they're doing the same thing. They're racing. You're going considerably faster in these F1 cars in some cases. And I think it takes a lot more skill, finesse, maybe, to learn how to drive a car that doesn't exist in the normal world. I think there is a lot of difficulty to driving a NASCAR car, but I think it's something more that you can pick up versus, because you got a steering wheel and pedals. Everything works the same. I mean, it's bulky and out of control, but I mean, I think there was a Top Gear episode at one point where they highlighted both of them, and gosh, what's his name? Richard Hammond. Yeah, he couldn't even really get it in gear. It was so difficult to get in gear, and he'd driven any car, like every car there is to drive. He's driven it, and he couldn't get that thing going.
The Formula car?
Yeah, the Formula One car. So there certainly is a lot of difference there.
There's a lot of electronics that go into it, and just in their steering wheel, watching an IndyCar race and then going to watch a Formula One race, it's just so they have that pass button. That's one thing that's interesting. So when you're coming around a car, you have 10 chances to use this thing, and it's a pass button that gives you a slight boost as you're going to pass around a car. That's one of the things that I saw, which in NASCAR, you'd never find something like that. We talk about how it's so much the aerodynamics and moving around a car. So I found that was one thing that was a huge differentiator.
They have it. You just don't know about it.
Oh, they do?
Well, I mean, cheating is NASCAR, so I'm sure they do.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, aside from this is a button that they get to press.
I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. There's a button. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I think they have it in IndyCar as well.
Huh. And there's definitely a lot more. I think there's a physical component to it. You definitely don't see drivers in their 40s and 50s driving F1.
No.
But there's only 20 of them, so it's very elite who gets selected to do it. And the crazy thing I always see, just because of the G-force that they endure when they're in these cars, the neck exercises that they're constantly doing, getting their neck prepared to take all that beating and banging as they're going through the corners. Because they are primarily racing road courses and street courses. You don't see any circular oval courses, super speedways on their circuit. They're either going on a track that's a road course is built to be that way, or they're turning a city into a racetrack somewhere in the world, which is also very cool, and also something that NASCAR has talked about in the last year about potentially doing, which I think would be new and different and definitely worth a shot to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think that one of their highlighting races is in Monaco. And I'm probably saying that wrong too.
We say Monaco.
And but they turn the city. That's something that's really cool. You've got just going. That is the true definition of a road course right there. And I think they say they just call it a street course there because they're literally running through the streets of a city. So I think that's pretty cool. And you mentioned that they do these 21 races and they're doing them across 6 continents. I don't know if you mentioned that, but the whole world is their stage.
Yeah, they have 21 races, but they're also in 21 countries. And what'd you say, 6 continents?
6 continents, yeah. I don't think they run down to Antarctica for anything yet.
Not yet. That's their next market. Yeah, so that brings us to the fan base, the broadcast fan base of attendance and watching it on TV throughout every year. So 1.9 billion people in the year 2019 watched F1 on television, which is 25% of the world. 25% of the world at some point caught a piece of a F1 race, which is craziness. 4 million people went to a race. So where does that stack up against NASCAR? 31 million people watched a NASCAR race in the year 2019. 31 million compared to 1.9 billion. The difference there is that NASCAR is only in one country. So that is why the reach is not as extensive as F1, which I don't think that we're wanting that. I love the fact that we can drive anywhere all over the country and go to a NASCAR race. So that's not certainly something that I think we should look to do. But if you're just looking at, if we're looking apples to apples, you consider 300 million people that live in the U.S., the states that they have reached to. So that's only 10% of the United States watch a NASCAR race. If we're just saying NASCAR is only available for folks in the U.S., which is not, but primarily definitely the base there. So not as big as F1 in viewership, but 2 million people yearly do go to racetracks So that's not too far off. 4 million versus 2 million. So yeah,
No, it looks
they're
like
definitely,
when we broke it down by event, and some of the stats that I pulled from 2019 said that F1 has about 120,000 per event, and NASCAR averages around 99,000 per event. So the event base, 21,000 is not that far off, and I'm sure that there are some that are bigger for them and smaller, and there's obviously some that are bigger, like Indianapolis, where you can fit 250,000 people in there. It's the biggest. So, but that's not too far off. So it's good to know that there's at least the same viewership live, or roughly.
So why is F1 so popular? It's definitely the prestige of the locations. The locations are all over the world and definitely cool spots. It's glamorous, it's thrilling. But the money component is definitely something that, wow, I was over here talking about these lower tier teams spending all this money on NASCAR. I did not have any idea how expensive it was to drive an F1 car or field an F1 team, which you can only have 2 cars on a team. So,
right.
So Chris, talk a little bit about that. I know you were looking into that.
I was flabbergasted. And right before I talk about that, I do want to touch on a little bit of like the demographics. So the interesting thing that I saw was that males are the majority of both of these audiences. There you go. More beer. We should have had like a beer counter for the audience as we're making this. We'll start that next episode for you guys. So 69% male for F1 and 63% male for NASCAR. So roughly the same. The thing that got me was 74% of the viewing audience for F1 is 16 to 44, whereas only 47% of the viewing audience for NASCAR is 18 to 44. They are capturing a large audience in F1 that is in that young age range, that's 16 to 44. So they're capturing from kids who can just start driving all the way up to, individuals who are traveling, working, and not retired individuals. But you get that same age range in NASCAR, and it's way, way smaller. And there's a lot larger portion of the demographic that is above 44 years old. So it seems like NASCAR, and you and I have talked about this, is struggling in finding a succession of fans who are younger and younger and younger and younger, whereas Formula One doesn't seem to be having that same challenge. So that was one thing that was interesting to me. They're solid fan base.
So how are they able to do that, you think?
I think a part of it is what you said, is because of the expanse of the sport. It is worldwide. So there's a lot of people. Their cars are much more fascinating. A Chevy Camaro is a cool car. A Ford Fusion is a cool car. A Ford Mustang is a cool car. Those are what you are seeing in Xfinity, and they're stock cars. They're trying to make it look like what you drive. The manufacturers that are operating in Formula One, when you get to Mercedes, you get to Alfa Romeo, you get to Romeo, Ferrari, Maserati. These are luxury brand cars that everybody looks at and goes, man, I'd like to drive one of those. When you see one driving down the street, it catches your eye. Even though it's not what it looks like driving down the street, it's these high brand manufacturers putting lots of money into building these engines and working to customize these chassis to make sure that they're, getting a leg up on every race. They're customizing these things. So I think that's one part of it is, when I was 16, it wasn't cool to, like, when you went to the golf course and you saw a guy driving a Chevy, you were like, oh, okay, cool. That guy's got a car. But then a guy pulls up in a Maserati and you're like, dang, man. And, there's a reason that Joe Walsh sings that his Maserati goes 185 and not his Chevy Malibu
or his Ford Focus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you make another good point there that kind of like hit me as you're talking, is that NASCAR drivers are a lot older than F1 drivers. F1 drivers are really young. So when you think about somebody being a fan at a young age of a 50-year-old man driving a car, I think that's less appealing to younger people to root for somebody who's old and driving a car that you can buy down at the lot versus a young kid who's driving this fascinating Mercedes or Ferrari, and it's just definitely more eye-catching and appealing to those kids.
But like you said, the money aspect. So that's a little bit of the money, and to parlay that into the cars themselves. So the stats that we got were from late 2018, early 2019, as the season was beginning in 2019 for NASCAR. Formula One is looking at about $470 million to field a team of 2 cars. NASCAR is looking at $25 million per car. On average. So
that is insane.
So, and part of it is the logistical nightmare that is Formula One. And I looked into what it takes to run these things around the country. You're running 50 plus tons of equipment from country to country, sometimes in a week.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely insane how they're able to pull these cars apart. So once the race is over and they've done their post-race inspection, they pull the cars apart, completely apart, package them in their own little container, and then they're moving not only the car, but they're moving catering equipment, they're moving team equipment on these massive jumbo jets from country to country. So I'm sure that's part of where the money comes to. It's definitely not as much money to run a hauler from North Carolina to Texas, Arizona, even California, as it is to get an Airbus from Monaco to Germany to the UK to Austria.
Monaco.
So that's definitely one part of it. And that's the glaring thing to me is the amount of money that goes into these cars not only speaks to the manufacturers that they're partnering with and the output there, but it speaks to the logistics and the cost that goes into running that team. I mean, you're talking, we said on average when we were going through the teams that it's an average of like 2 cars per team. So if you take that, it's $50 million. If you make the jump to Formula One, you're going up $420 million to field that team.
It's nuts.
So do you have anything that you think, as we've been talking here, I've got one thing in my head that I think NASCAR could adopt. Are there any things that you see from Formula One that you wouldn't want NASCAR to do? And are there any things that you think NASCAR could take to make it more successful?
I thought you'd never ask. Yes. I've been biting my tongue for 5 episodes now to get this out of I don't know. I haven't really thought. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about things that they do that I wouldn't want them to do. I certainly wouldn't want to see all road courses or all street courses every single race.
Certainly.
Yeah, but there are definitely some different things. And I'll let you go first. I'm interested to hear what you had to say on what NASCAR can take away from what they do really well that we could bring to the sport to make it better.
So what I don't like about it is the 19 to 21 race schedule, whatever it may be. That to me is just too short. I think the reason that people like NASCAR is because you've got it almost every weekend out of the year, aside from 14 weekends or something like that. So I wouldn't want them to decrease the amount of races. The one thing that I do like, and we saw it in this Xfinity race, is these guys raced on that road course hard as could be for the entire 150 miles. I think Formula One has a good take on how short their races are. Like you said last week, I don't think we need races that are 500 and 600 miles. I think that 300 to 350 mile range is a sweet spot. It gave us good racing at Pocono where we normally don't get it. So I think that would be good. My biggest takeaway is I think NASCAR needs to follow the framework that has been laid out by the NFL, by MLB. I think we need to take racing somewhere else one time. I'm not saying that we need to start going to Germany and Austria for multiple times a year and running races, but they have adapted some things from the NFL and they have done them so much better in a variety of different aspects. I think if you were to go to Canada where Formula One races, if you were to go down to Mexico where they have part of their diversity program and they're bringing people through it, like a Daniel Suarez who came out of there, still goes down there and races in the off season. Or if you were to just go over to the UK one time, I know there's logistics behind it. I looked it up. It's like $15,000 to ship a car overseas, but that's chump change for these guys. I mean, get us 36 cars and take them across the pond, and people are going to show out. One thing that I consistently saw in these articles is the reason that Formula One fans don't recognize or don't watch NASCAR is they don't know who they are. And what better way to do that than to bring them there? People thought London was going to be a bust for football, and people love it now. And same with Mexico City. So that's my big thing.
Yeah, and I'm a little more hesitant on saying that I think they should follow in the footsteps of the NFL, because I do think they have done that to some degree with failure running along with those strategies. Not saying that it couldn't be done again if the right strategy was in place to do it. I do agree with you that I think NASCAR should reach out and attempt a race in Canada or Mexico, or even the UK. I think at some point I can't remember when it was, but maybe in the 90s, they went to Japan.
And that doesn't make any sense.
It made zero sense.
That is the strategy that you do not adopt.
Yeah. So most race fans, F1 fans, are in the UK. So not in the UK, but in Europe. Yeah. Right. So definitely a market to potentially dip into there.
I think it's I think it's hard when you're crossing over, especially I think there is a huge unknown factor. I think the reason that F1 is growing in popularity is because we kind of have a stepping stone here in the United States to see an Indy car. Okay, that looks different. And then you see F1 and, oh, okay, well, I've seen something like this before and I can watch it. And then you get these beautiful venues that it looks like you're watching some type of movie when they're racing in Austria, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So I think there is a huge knowledge gap, and it's going to be harder to get a Formula One fan to go from this open-wheeled, high-class brand to go, hey, come watch these Chevys and Fords and Toyotas go after one another. Yeah. And it's different.
I don't think we hit on this, but IndyCar in America is not as popular as NASCAR. So
no.
It's essentially the same kind of car. The difference is the kind of racetracks they primarily race on. So they're not always on road courses or street courses, and they're based in one country. So F1, this is what I think. So F1 has criticisms that it shares with NASCAR. It's too expensive to attend, it's boring, and the same drivers win. So they all share those same criticisms. But I think there's some things that F1 has done better that NASCAR can take away from it. Number one, shorten the race. You just hit on this, and it's so true. Race car drivers, they get comfortable in riding out a majority of the race until they have to start racing. They have to be aggressive because they don't want to wreck their car in lap 2 of a 400, 500-mile race.
Right.
Put it into perspective. 90 minutes is the max race time for an F1 race. A NASCAR race, 240, 3 to 4 hours long, almost 3 times as long. You have to – if you're watching the pre-race and the post-race, I mean, you could very well be in front of the TV from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. It can take up your entire day. It's just way too long. It's too much of a commitment for most people. It shouldn't be that long. And I think you'd see more excitement if it was lesser and not as long. So another thing, I've already hit on this, but lessen the field. I don't think it's necessary to have 40 drivers. I think 30 would be sufficient. And maybe continue to allow teams to have up to 4 cars. But maybe you'll see those teams continue to adopt more cars, and you'll see some of those lower funded, smaller teams either merge or just kind of dissolve as they can't compete. I don't know that a lot of people share that opinion. Definitely more cars on the tracks can cause more excitement, more things to happen. But I just don't want to see it. I don't want to see a car that's 12 laps down run into the leader of the race. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see somebody that has been out front all day and is the faster car be screwed over on a restart, even though it's exciting to watch, and lose the race in overtime because a race car 12 laps down ran into the wall or something, or a battery fell out.
I agree. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's one thing. And when you're talking about mileage, you talked about 90 minutes, but I think the longest that they run is like 175 miles in F1. And so you're talking Xfinity race length all the time in F1. And people are still tuning in. And I think it's because you can tune in for an afternoon and still have your day.
Yeah, it doesn't take that long to watch an F1 race. It could be 2 hours max, I think, is the longest F1 race you could watch. It doesn't take very long to watch one.
Yeah.
So that's a commitment that people are willing to make. Some other things that I think we should do is no track repeats in a schedule. There are so many good racetracks in America. Why must we go to Michigan twice? Why must we go to Kansas twice? Why must we go to Texas twice? We should not be going to these racetracks twice. We should be going to
the lowest rated racetracks. That, like you touched on it last week.
Yeah, I don't
think mile and a halfers 2 times a year is ridiculous. Yeah,
I don't want to see it. No one wants to see it. The only person who wants to see that is somebody who lives 1 hour or less from that track. Exactly. They get to go. That's the only people who care. So I don't want to see it. And I want to see more breadth of tracks. I want to see new and different. I want to see something I haven't seen before. I want to be excited that next week is Kentucky and we haven't seen Kentucky since last year. That's what I want to see. Include different type of tracks. So we touched on this already, a whole entire episode. Too many mile and a halfers. We see the same track for a third of the season of NASCAR. And that's a lot. That's way too many. We don't have as many short tracks. We should have more. We should have road courses. That's just something they need to get more of. And I think, why not try a street race? What happens? If it doesn't take off, then we don't have to do it in the future. But at least you gave it a shot.
Right. And it would change what it looks like. I think that's the biggest thing is people see, and you went through the different types of tracks last week. You've got, a rectangular oval at Indianapolis. You've got a D-shaped oval. You've got a tri-oval. You've got all these different types of tracks. But to somebody who's not in tune with that, you can turn on those things and they all look the same. It looks like a bunch of cars going left for 4 hours on end. So I think that's one of the things that Formula One has capitalized on is they change the scenery. It looks different when you go from the UK to Austria to Monaco or one of these places.
Monaco.
So somebody from Monaco is going to.
No one from Monaco is going to be watching.
We've got a couple F1 guys that follow us.
Oh, yeah?
So we'll see.
My final point, and I think quite possibly the most important point that I'll make on this topic is education. And I think this has come about over the past couple of episodes. It really hit home for me as we're talking to these newer NASCAR fans that are getting into the sport, who are listening to this podcast or just watching it on TV because there's nothing else to watch, is they don't know what the heck is going on. And they're unwilling to make that commitment to learn because NASCAR has made it so wildly complicated to figure out what the rules are. Mm-hmm. Chris and I easily watch 10 hours or listen to 10 hours of NASCAR content per week at minimum, I would guess.
Yeah.
There is times when something is going on or a qualifying round is being done differently, and I'm like, well, when the hell did this happen? I don't even know what's going on right now. And if somebody who lives, breathes, and dreams the sport of NASCAR can't follow what is going on in NASCAR, good luck to a sport to try to get new fans. That is not going to happen. So I think instead of making more complex rules and more rules, they should make it just more simple. It doesn't matter if somebody put their hand over the wall and there's only 10 guys over the wall allowed, or whatever the number is.
He touched it.
Who cares? Are we really going to do that? Just like, it's just ridiculous. The nitpicking. There's not lug nuts on the car afterwards. It's a $25,000 fine. It's changed. Everything changes every single day, it seems, which I applaud if it's going in the right direction and you're making changes based on things that are proven or things that you have enough study in to think that it will. It's just so complicated and changing so rapidly that I can see why it's hard for people to keep up with the sport. So eventually, I'm a NASCAR fan. I've been watching the sport for 30 years, but I tune in every third race of the month, and I don't know what's going on anymore. I don't know who any of these drivers are. You know what? I think I'm just going to call it. I think that's what you're seeing happening. And it's just not kid-friendly. It's not younger fan-friendly. I know that they do a lot of things to try to get younger fans involved, but the complexity of it does not appeal to them. So no. I think that's an issue. And the final thing, which
the second final thing.
Well, it's still under education, under the umbrella. But the thing that I feel would be the most effective in getting fans fast and getting them up to speed quickly is make a documentary about NASCAR. The best thing that F1 ever did was make a docuseries on Netflix. It told you everything that you needed to know about F1. You got to know the drivers, the personalities, the teams, the team owners, the team on the team. You got to see how everything worked, the rules, the racetracks, the drivers, everything about it. There's nothing that is left untouched in those documentaries that someone who says, I want to be an F1 fan doesn't need to know. And if NASCAR would simply reach out and branch out and provide some sort of educational content like that, that's not on Peacock or Track Pass or FS1, I mean, that is something that people would binge watch in a day and be like, you know what? That was pretty cool. I'm going to watch it this weekend.
Yeah, and I agree with you on all points. My final piece would be, I do think we need to appeal to a younger fan base. There is no succession initiative in place successfully as it stands. I do believe that Phelps is doing a lot of stuff. I think the move to the single lug nut is to remove a lot of the BS that goes on behind the wall and in front of the wall that causes people to go, wait, look at their fantasy lineup and go, how is Truex in the back now? How is Denny in the back? And they've been running up front all day. It's removing stupid mistakes. So I think you hit it on all points. I completely agree. We've got to appeal to a younger fan base. We've got to make the sport look different because it looks as much the same as it did in 1955 as it does in 2020. And that's not a winning strategy for anybody. It hasn't been for any sport. Mm-hmm. So I think you hit the nail on the head, and I don't have much more to add other than I really think we've got to be appealing to a younger fan base because that's what it appears F1 does exponentially better than NASCAR, with 74% of their audience falling in that 18 to 44 age range, where 47 of that is NASCAR's. So once the boomers fade out, where does the sport go?
I don't know. There's definitely a lot of different components to it, but that's just definitely something I wanted to bring to the table here is a sport that's also racing cars that is wildly more popular, granted internationally, but it is more popular in the grand scheme of things. So I hope that NASCAR can look outward and not say, I want to be the NFL, but they can look outward at another successful motorsports sport
point.
and say, I think we should take some success that they've had in these areas and try our hand at that. Yeah, so good discussion. All right, next up, we're going to talk about next week, which is Kentucky. It's Chris's backyard. Chris, are you excited about Kentucky?
I am excited about Kentucky because it's in my backyard. I would be more excited if I could go to Kentucky this year. It's unfortunate with the COVID, and now that Jimmy Johnson has gotten it, I know it's not a hoax, the healthiest guy that I know of out there, but I am excited for it. I really think, and we've touched on it a couple times, Pocono brought us great racing. Indianapolis brought us a better race, a more competitive race this year. I'm hoping we continue the trend. I'm hoping that we're wrong about these 1.5 mile tracks, that there is something that they can do to bring us more into the future than the car of the future did. So I am excited about it. I won't be excited if it's the Busch brothers battling for a win again.
I'm excited. We got Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup all in one weekend. 3 races, all on Fox. Get your channels right. FS1 to be exact. But I think we could see some good racing. I think they've cracked the code more so on Kentucky with the PJ1 or the 4 or whatever the heck.
PJ4, yeah. Traction compound.
Whatever they call it these days. I think there is a 1. I don't know what the difference is. It's some sticky crap they put on the racetrack that we like to see. So I think we're in store for some good racing. I'm excited about it.
So what race do you have going on behind you?
It's Kentucky. I'm not really sure what year. In the last, whenever, I think it's been around 19 years at this point. So one of those years.
Yeah.
And you have joined me with the TV. You have a much larger television. You have 3 actually behind you. So you could be watching 3 races at once. But what track or what race is that?
Yeah, that is Kentucky 2019 when the Busch brothers were banging doors for the win. So
debatably the best Kentucky race.
Yeah, it definitely was a fun one. It's always fun to watch those guys go at it. Kyle, of course, had a sour attitude about his brother winning, but
no,
you don't say. But yeah, Kentucky 2019 behind me. So
what's even more exciting is that people are starting to talk about silly season, and I like silly season. Look how silly this is. I really like to guess who is going where. So a few silly season updates that we've heard about so far is Kyle Larson could be going to Stewart Haas. That was a rumor that started almost immediately when he got banned from NASCAR.
Right.
And it kind of makes sense that Tony Stewart, a driver who has had his own issues throughout the sport of getting in trouble with different things, would also take another driver who had a similar issue, who is a really great driver. So I do think that Kyle Larson will take Clint Bowyer's spot. Clint Bowyer, I think, will go to Fox. He'll take that 3rd spot there with Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon. I really do think that'll happen.
And that would add some color there, too. I hope that happens.
Yeah, because Darrell Waltrip added that color, that crazy hillbilly. He'll say anything, boogity, boogity, boogity. So I think Clint will definitely bring something to the table that's a little bit stale and vanilla there. Needs something. Yeah. And I think that we'd see it. But Chase Briscoe, we talked about this earlier, but man, he is definitely looking like a driver that could be in the Cup next year, which Stewart Haas would be the obvious place for him. So I don't know. He could take the spot in the 14. I don't know. But we also got the 48. Who is going to take over for Jimmy Johnson?
My God, and that rumor mill is just a freaking churning. And boy, does it chap my ass. I can't – I start to get excited when it was Ross Chastain. It's like, yeah, I'd take the watermelon man. The guy who came from a watermelon farmer, was racing, smashes the watermelon. That'd be awesome. Like, cool personality, good racer. And then everything starts flowing out there. I just saw after this race, and it wasn't due to any of the comments made, but people were talking about how Rick Hendrick was going to try and wine and dine Tyler Reddick. And I didn't know as much about the NASCAR contracts and how they work, but he could easily buy out the contract and bring him in. And if he's racing this well, you don't want to bring somebody into the 48 that's going to take 3 years to get up to speed. That's how you're going to lose a bunch of fans. So that rumor mill is churning. The Brad Keselowski, there was Denny Hamlin being thrown in there for a second, which, dear Lord, please don't let it be Denny.
Yeah,
There's so much going on.
I think Denny is like basically a franchise player at this point. I don't think that he's going to leave JGR or take FedEx elsewhere. But there are so many drivers that are getting older into their career, or just different drivers that haven't really taken off. Eric Jones hasn't really shown a whole lot, driving for one of the best teams in NASCAR. So I could potentially see him being replaced. Who would that be? Would Christopher Bell take his place? Would somebody else take his place? I don't know. So it's very early. It's July. Season ends in November. But there will start to be some shuffling going on here. So I'm really excited to see that take off. But mark your calendars this weekend. Set your DVR. Don't forget to watch Trucks, Xfinity,
your TiVo,
and Cup. Your TiVo, if those still exist, make sure you tune in. So it should be a good one.
And we've got ARCA too. ARCA's at Kentucky. So we've got 4. If you have NBC Track Pass, you can watch the ARCA race at Kentucky too.
I did not know that. Yeah, so ARCA as well.
So we've got 4 races.
I wish they included on the NASCAR app ARCA along with it. I don't know why they don't.
Yeah, you've got to go to the ARCA arcaracing.com to get their schedule, but they have the General Tire 150 going on. So it's a little bit shorter race. Usually they're running like 200s, but it's a little bit shorter. And Haley Deegan had a good showing at the Lucas Oil, the other track up there in Indy. So
I think 3rd, 4th.
Yeah, third. So she finished P3. So it'll be fun to watch them. And there's some pretty impressive drivers down there as well. It's really top heavy series, but that'll be fun to watch. I'm excited about that at Kentucky. We thank you all for joining us this week on Going In Tight, Coming Out Loose. As always, you can find us on goingintightpodcast.com, or you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at goingintight_pod. We are also available on all major podcasting platforms except Apple. We're waiting for approval on them.